be starting shortly. We'll be starting shortly in about 2 minutes. Enjoy music. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our climate rally for 2021. Today, we'll be going over how you guys can act now and how you guys can get involved in local climate action. Oh, and wait, yeah, I think Bianca, you're talking now. Sorry.
Thank you. I am just going to go over some quick etiquette for Zoom. For those of you who might be new to Zoom or might need interpretation, this is for you. So bear with me for those of you who are not new to Zoom. Por favor, les voy a explicar un poquito sobre cómo usar Zoom para los que son nuevos a esta plataforma. Ahora vamos a indicarles que a través del chat es donde podemos participar y hacer nuestras preguntas. Through the chat is where you would be able to pose your questions. You can also raise your hand and you will be prompted to be unmuted so that you can speak and ask your question on your own. Si necesita interpretación, les pedimos que levanten la mano o también levantar la mano si tiene preguntas y no lo quiere indicar en el chat. A través de la imagen, aquí el globito donde dice interpretación, es donde usted va a seleccionar esa imagen para poder ser interpretado a través del señor Roberto. Si están en su celular, ustedes van a ver una imagen como los tres puntitos en la esquina es donde se le va a seleccionar, donde le va a salir otra pantalla donde se le va a indicar del chat, la interpretación de lenguajes y cómo levantar la mano. Al igual es donde aquí puede identificar sus reacciones, como dar una carita feliz, un corazón. If you are on your cell phone, you will see a screen like this on your phone. With the 3 dots is where you would select to get to the chat, to get language interpretation, or raise your hand. I'm going to need to stop sharing real quick so that I can make the interpretation live. And we're going to have Roberto Rodrigan be the one who is going to be translating. El señor Roberto Rodrigan es el que va a traducir o interpretar de inglés a español. Roberto, ahí puede seleccionar usted que sí acepta interpretación. Si hay alguien que necesita intérprete, por favor levante la mano para indicarle al Roberto que sí va a estar trabajando durante esta sesión. Y le vamos a dar un poquito de tiempo. I'm just going to give folks who need interpretation just a quick minute to raise their hand if they do need to go into interpretation room, just to make sure that Roberto knows that he will have someone to interpret. I will ask, voy a preguntar a través de la presentación si alguien nuevo entra a la plataforma para poder interpretarles bien. So I'm going to let you guys go back to the screen. I'm going to share my screen again, and then we're going to resume our presentation. And every now and then I'll ask if folks need to, can you see my screen? Sorry, I wasn't sure that I shared the right one. Okay, and it is all yours, Liz.
Thank you. All right, so in the spirit of our rally, we are gathered here today as a community to promote the common good, the health and the well-being of all the people who live here, as well as the health of our land, air, and water. So let's be friendly, welcoming, and respectful throughout our time together. Thank you. All right. So climate, CJAN stands for Climate Justice Action Now. And so our organization is dedicated towards getting young people into local climate action and getting them to help better our environment and our community. So, yeah. All right, so just a quick recap. Yesterday we had Dr. Moroka talk about climate change in the Central Valley. And then today, during part one, we had keynote speaker Monica De Oro talk about climate change and how that's affecting her community and what they're doing to get involved in local climate action and how they're trying to stop the spread of waste. And yeah. So for today, we'll be going over what is climate action, how you can get involved at the federal, state, and local levels, and we'll have highlights from youth organizations and presentations about environmental racism. And also we will have your Act Now, or what is your pledge? And I will pass the invisible microphone to Robin.
Thank you, Liz. So before we get into all of that, we just wanted to do a quick recap or an introduction of what is climate change. So yesterday at our event, as Liz had said, we had a presentation by Dr. Jeff Miroka from the Atmospheric Science Division at Lawrence Livermore Labs. And he was talking, and he gave us a very vivid description about all the different things about climate change. But if you missed that, a brief recap on this, it encapsulates all the different things that you're seeing on the screen: global warming, extreme weather, expenditure of natural resources faster than we can replenish it, and then also the things with economic systems as well. But most of this is based off of anthropogenic climate change, which means that human-caused, man-made climate change, which is really what's exacerbating all of the different natural functions and makes the progression of climate change untenable beyond. Has the potential to make it untenable beyond what we are able to put up bulwarks for as of now. Next slide, please. So what we wanted to do today is we want this event to function as a jumping off point for a lot of different people. We wanted to involve a lot more young people and stuff, but we don't want this to just be a singular event. We want this to become the start of something bigger. Because it is not a moment. It's not just this moment. It is a movement that we are trying to do. We are trying to flip the page and begin a new chapter in our march towards climate justice. Next slide, please. And to do that, we have a lot. And to get our inspiration, and to get our creative juices flowing, we have a bunch of speakers that we have around, that we have coming to speak to us about all the different levels of all the different levels of politics that we can do. So for the federal side, we have, so we're gonna now welcome Alex Gordon from the Break Free from Plastic Coalition to speak to us about like federal plastic policies, as well as getting more youth involved in that as well. So I will pass that off to her.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. So you can see my little box floating. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, can everyone see this? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, looking good. Okay.
Good.
Great. Okay, well, again, hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with the Student PIRG / the Break Free from Plastic Coalition. And I'll explain what all of that means in a second. And I'll specifically be talking about the Break Free from Plastic movement and how that relates to climate change and some federal policy action that everyone here can take on this, but also how young people and really students specifically can make a really big difference in this space. So I promise this relates to climate change. We'll get there and it'll be like a full circle kind of experience. But first, just to explain who I am and what I do. So the Student PIRGs, that fun acronym, the Public Interest Research Group, is a national network of student-run and partially student-funded, nonpartisan nonprofits. We work on public interest issues, so anything from youth voter engagement to working on hunger and homelessness in our communities to what I'm most passionate about, stopping the worst impacts of climate change. We just want to make sure that students are empowered to make whatever difference we want to see in the world on whatever issues that we care the most about. But we recognize that for young people, climate change really is the biggest issue of our time. It's what our generation is going to have to deal with the most in the future. So we run a lot of campaigns that are specifically focused on reducing the worst impacts of climate change. Our biggest one right now is our 100% renewable campaign, which focuses on getting college campuses to commit to going to 100% renewables. But the one that I work on is our Break Free from Plastic campaign. So that works with college campuses, high school campuses, and local communities to get folks to sign a pledge that phases out non-essential single-use plastics. I also, as mentioned, work with the Break Free from Plastic Coalition, which is a group of all of these incredible organizations that come together to work to figure out policy solutions, that work to motivate the public to taking action on the single-use plastic crisis. So that's what I do. And then just a little bit more about who the person speaking to you right now actually is. I am a student. I'm a senior at Eckerd College. I study environmental studies and political science, which I feel like makes a lot of sense for what I'm currently talking about. But I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and growing up there is pretty much the entire reason I got involved in the environmental movement. When I was 10, the BP oil spill happened, and I grew up going to the coast. My family is originally from Louisiana, and seeing the impacts of the BP oil spill, even at 10 years old, made me realize that I needed and really, really wanted to take action. I just had no idea how to do that. So my senior year of high school, Hurricane Harvey hit, and it allowed me to see that the worst impacts of climate change were coming right into my backyard. So I got really passionate about the climate movement my senior year of high school and decided I wanted to go to college and be an environmental studies major. And I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just felt like I needed to be doing something. So when I got to Eckerd, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida, right on the water, I hit the ground running and got involved with our PIRG chapter on campus and spent my entire first semester registering all of my peers to vote in the 2018 midterm elections. And I loved doing that. We were able to increase voter turnout by about 350%, and seeing the impact that we can make in the youth voting space really made me want to take everything I had learned and turn it over into environmental change. So I started to recognize that Eckerd had a really big plastic problem. We're right on the water, so you could see single-use plastics floating around just by sitting there. But in my environmental studies classes, I was learning that the plastic industry is actually one of the largest contributors to climate change. So I figured by working to reduce single-use plastic pollution on my campus, I would also be contributing to stopping the worst impacts of climate change, like hurricanes like Harvey, like Ida that just hit Louisiana, Nicholas that just hit Houston. So by working on plastics, I was realizing that I would also be working on climate. So to get into the actual issue here, I think everyone here probably knows the problems with single-use plastics, but just so we're all on the same page, this material is bad from when it's pulled out of the ground as oil, to when it's created, to when we use it, to when we attempt to dispose it. 99% of plastics are made out of fossil fuels. So just the production process is emitting harmful emitters that are bad for human health, but also a huge amount of greenhouse gases that again make the plastics industry one of the largest contributors to climate change. This plastic has to be transported somewhere. So we've got huge truckers driving across the country and planes flying across the world transporting this plastic, which is again emitting greenhouse gases. And then most of these production sites are usually in low income areas or areas that are occupied predominantly of people of color. So really excited for the environmental racism talk a little bit later, because the plastic pollution issue is a huge environmental injustice in a lot of communities. My home in Houston, about 20 minutes from a huge petrochemical plant, and it's a predominantly Black neighborhood. So just to reiterate, plastic is bad from its birth to when we try to get rid of it, and it's a huge contributor to the climate change issue. And the only way to actually solve this entire issue of non-essential single-use plastic consumption is to just stop making it. What we don't need to be using, and this is the only foolproof method to stop our harmful production of single-use plastics. So how do we actually do that? There are a million different ways for getting there. Passing local and state policies are of course key. So we'll have other folks talking about the local and state work soon. Focusing on individual items like getting just a bag ban is really important, or just a straw ban is really effective as well. Something that I'll be talking about is getting corporate and institutional commitments. So getting a high school or college campus to commit to phasing out non-essential single-use plastics, or even getting a company like Coca-Cola to only use glass bottles or something like that. But I also just like to highlight that it's really important to continue bringing people into this movement. Rallies like this are great. Also just talking to our friends and families about these issues, and to talk about plastics, but also climate change as the nonpartisan issues they are, because it doesn't matter who you are, climate change is going to affect you. So making sure we're bringing people into this movement. So that's what we can do in the big scale of things. But what about federal policy? So getting comprehensive federal policy passed is really, really difficult. And it really is all about momentum. To get major substantive policy change, we need momentum in the local municipalities and also in the states. So local power is critical and is actually going to be what encourages federal municipalities to take action. So the main piece of policy in the plastics world is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which I'll explain a little bit more about. But this is a great bill because even though it is going to be really difficult to get this passed on such a huge level, it sets a really incredible standard for what good policy looks like that actually tackles the single-use plastic crisis and gets at the root of a lot of these problems. So federal policy depends on momentum, but it also sets really good examples for what states and local groups can do. So here's the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, just a quick rundown. I'm going to put a link in the chat. If I can find the chat really quickly. Or I'll put it in after this. Can't seem to find the chat currently, but I'll put a link in the chat that goes way more in depth about the actual Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act bill and some action that you all can take. But basically this bill is everything that plastic pollution and climate activists have been fighting for. And it's totally comprehensive, addresses pretty much all of the issues we want to be addressed at the federal level. So how do we get something like this passed? Because it's huge and it's going to take a lot of people. The biggest thing, again, is to build support. So if we can get cities across the nation to make their own commitments, that will encourage states to make their own commitments. And then the federal government will see that this is a nationwide concern and that folks across our country are rooting for a plastic policy or a comprehensive climate change policy. And that's really what it's going to come down to. So I can't say momentum enough here because it really is what's going to make the difference at the federal level. Another unique thing that we can do at this level, though, is influenced rulemaking. So, for example, if an agency like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is considering whether or not to endorse incineration, for example, as a solution to plastic pollution, we can call into the EPA or leave a bunch of public comments encouraging them not to do that, because incineration is just burning plastic. And when you're burning something that's 99% made out of fossil fuels, you're just emitting more greenhouse gases all over again. So things like that can be really important. Right now, there's a campaign to get the National Park Service to stop selling single-use plastic water bottles. So when that grows, we can get really into calling the National Park Service and encouraging them to reduce their single-use plastic consumption as well. I found the chat. So here's the link to the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act link. It goes over everything that you need in order to take action on this bill, but also just explains what it is really well. So again, building support is really what's going to make a difference here. And we can also make a difference in the rulemaking space. But I think students and young people have a really unique avenue to doing this kind of work. So what can students specifically do? The first thing that we have access to are our campuses. Whether you are a college student, high school student, elementary school, some of us live at our schools like I do, or we're at least spending 8 hours a day at our schools, and we can make a really big difference there. So campuses make a really unique opportunity to create this kind of change because we have a closed loop and captive audience that's there to listen to us. Campuses are also kind of like mini versions of the cities that they're in. So anything that you change on your campus can influence your city. So for example, here at Eckerd, we got the school to commit to phasing out non-essential single-use plastics. And when we passed that, our city council took notice, and now I'm working with our city council to pass a citywide version of the Break Free from Plastic Pledge. So campuses can make a huge impact. And then if St. Petersburg does that, maybe the city next to us, Tampa, which is lots bigger, will also take action. And then maybe the state eventually will take action. So these small things can build up to making something much bigger than you could have ever imagined in the first place. When I started this work, I had no idea that I would even be in this position speaking about the things that I did. So any small goal that you have set for yourself can really make a huge impact, especially on the federal policy scale. And then the second thing that young people can do is just be young people. We, again, have access to a lot of really unique spaces. And historically, there has never been a single effective movement for change that did not involve young people. The civil rights movement, the protests against the Vietnam War, and now we're seeing it in the youth climate movement. Young people have literally always been at the forefront for change. We're extremely passionate, especially about environmental issues, and we have a lot of unique ideas to give. Actually, our generation, Gen Z, is the largest and most diverse generation in our nation's history. So we have a diverse background, diverse values and frame of thought that we can contribute to a movement that's going to take as big as a policy action as the climate movement. So young people are in a really unique position to make change here. And specifically, I think there are 3 things that we can do as it relates to the plastic movement, but also the climate movement as a whole. So the first I already mentioned is getting those campus commitments, because like I said, getting your campuses to do things is going to get the city you're in to do things, or at least to take note. Also, if your campus commits to something, that's not just your school administrators committing to making a change, that's every single person who goes to your school. So last year, we got UCLA to commit to phasing out non-essential single-use plastics. And then the entire UC system then also committed to phasing out non-essential single-use plastics. And there are about 500,000 students, faculty, and staff in the entire UC system. So that's 500,000 people who are going to be impacted in reducing their non-essential single-use plastic consumption. So even though this may seem small, this can get really big really quickly and impact a really large number of people, no matter where you are. So campus commitments are great. And to spark anyone who's interested in doing something like that, I'm going to put this link in the chat that leads to the Break Free from Plastic Pledge. So this is what I got Eckerd to sign. This is a version of what the UC system signed. And this can be modified for any school or even any local government. The St. Petersburg City Council has been using this to model theirs, so it can also be scaled up to that. I'm going to drop my contact information at the end of this if folks are really interested in getting the nitty-gritty behind launching a campaign like this. So would be happy to talk about that a bit later. But campus commitments are great. The second thing is building student power on local policies. So working on building up power on college campuses or your high school for the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. You can stage call-ins to your representatives, get all of your friends to just call into their office and ask them to support the bill. You can write letters to your newspaper, just getting a lot of students to take action. And then the last thing, which we'll have someone else talk about, is taking local action, because like I mentioned, once local municipalities take action, the federal government can take more notice. So it really does depend on building the momentum, starting at the local level and working our way up to federal policy. So the key takeaways here are to just remember that federal policy is, again, so heavily influenced by local and state work. It takes a lot of momentum, but that momentum can come from the ground up, which can be really empowering. And then the second thing is that there's so much room for young people to make a difference. Even though the federal policy scale can seem huge and like there's a million things that need to be done, young people have really unique access to communities. And again, we are the largest and most diverse generation. So we can make a lot of change if we're invested in and given the resources to do so. I think we'll have some time for questions at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and put my contact information in the chat. And thank you all so much for allowing me to speak and doing this work and having an awesome rally like this.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. So yes, what we're going to be, and just a note that I wanted to let everyone know is we will be saving this chat and we will be sending it out as a follow-up email. So all the different links and for contact information, you don't have to write them all down right now. We will send them out to you later as part of the things. And another note, we will be having questions, but if everyone could put their questions into the chat, and then we'll be having a kind of a group question session at the end when all three of these speakers have already given their topics, and then we will move on from there. Okay, so now to more talk about what you can do at the state level. I would like to welcome Davis Harper from the Climate Center to give his presentation.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That come up for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. So my name is Davis Harper, and I'm a community organizer based in Stockton, California. I work for a nonprofit called the Climate Center. We're an energy and climate policy nonprofit focused on essentially reducing climate pollution at scale in California. I'm going to be running over the basics of our Climate Safe California campaign, which is fundamentally really about accelerating equitable climate action at the state level. And as I mentioned, for a little bit more background, we're focused on climate and energy policy in particular. And I will jump onto the next slide here. Our vision, really fundamentally, we believe in thriving, healthy communities, right? So envisioning a future where we have a clean energy transition, where all Californians enjoy equal access to climate solutions, from clean air to renewable energy, healthful food, and more. And our Climate Safe California campaign is calling for, by 2025, for the state to have enacted the bold policies required to secure resilient communities, dramatically reduce emissions, and remove more climate pollution than we emit by 2030. And our guiding principles for Climate Safe California, for the targets, the policies and programs, everything that we advocate for. The first is that we prioritize climate justice, right? That we make sure that lower income communities, communities of color are no longer disproportionately harmed by fossil fuels. Not only those communities that are in direct proximity to natural gas generation plants, but also those that endure toxic wildfire smoke due to anthropogenic climate change, and also making sure that communities of color are also strongly considered, right, in front and center in conversations about job creation opportunities with the clean energy transition as well. So that's a huge one. As well as all of these policies and programs are really based on the latest climate science. We rely a lot on the IPCC reports, as well as ensuring a just transition for fossil fuel workers and their families. And our theory of change is really that from the ground level, we really want to start conversations with local governments, local elected officials, to push their state legislators and the governor to take bolder climate action. in particular, resolutions, letters of support, individual endorsements of the campaign, things to get the ball rolling, essentially. And while we're here, right, we saw the latest IPCC report calling the climate crisis a code red for humanity. Here in California, our fall fire weather days have doubled since 1980. And we know that the burning of fossil fuels has created these conditions, right, for large wildfires to get destructive. Here in the Central Valley, we have toxic air quality already, and increased wildfires are contributing to that issue as well. And we're in a global warming induced mega drought, right? From between the last 20 years was the second driest period in the past 1200 years. Some studies have projected dust bowl conditions, and this has a lot of economic impacts, right? The 2015 drought we know cost $2.7 billion and 20,000 jobs. And we're right in the middle of another pretty extreme drought period currently that we know climate change has exacerbated. Other ways climate inaction is bankrupting our economy are, right, the wildfires themselves are costing hundreds of billions of dollars. So lots of action needed on that front. And I'd be remiss also without addressing the impacts of climate change on human health, right? The heat-related illnesses in the Central Valley, and like I mentioned, increased wildfires driving air pollution as well. So hammering home this point, right, that we're seeing wildfire activity, for example, that wasn't projected for another 10 years. So it really highlights the need for urgent action and a record surge of methane emissions in 2020. That's also been driving global warming as well. So the point of all this, right, we have a lot of problems, but California is behind on solutions on climate goals at the statewide level. We're behind the European Union, the UK, Rhode Island, and our own president's administration. And I really want to highlight the one policy in President Biden's platform is to have 100% greenhouse gas free electricity sector by 2035. We're 10 years behind that here in California. And that's a really important policy, right, to be able to start electrifying other sectors as well. So that's why what the focus of our Climate Safe California campaign is to really push up our targets from going carbon neutral by 2045 to being carbon negative by 2030. So actually drawing in more climate pollution than we emit by 2030, essentially. And the way we do that, probably the first obvious point is that we have to stop burning fossil fuels, right? We've got to accelerate the phase out of the development, production, and use of fossil fuels and really scale up nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration. And I know Dr. Morocco covered this very well yesterday, the ability of our soils to store more carbon, the ability of forests to be carbon sinks as well. So major investments there, as well as investing in community resilience, including for areas that are impacted by extreme heat, making areas more energy independent, right? And giving communities more essentially independence on where their energy comes from, but also that they're able to control their energy resources locally so that they can minimize power outages. And fourth, we have to find really innovative, equitable ways to pay for all of this, right? So leveraging private sector dollars as well, and not having everyone foot the bill. So I wanted to kind of go over like just a short legislative recap. We know that in the last several years, and this year included, Sacramento's progress on climate has really slowed, while the urgency of the climate crisis has only increased. There were a lot of really great climate bills this year, but fossil fuel industry groups and their allies worked really hard to make sure that these bills didn't get to the governor's desk. And here's kind of an overview on some of the top ones. And these are just four. There were so many more. SB 99 was our sponsored bill with the Climate Center, and this would have offered support to local governments to be able to develop clean energy resilience plans. So things like I'd mentioned, really important for communities experiencing extreme heat, especially for communities that have their power practically shut off. So the foothills and large parts of the Bay Area as well. SB 582 was really the first bill in the legislature to actually accelerate greenhouse gas reduction timelines, which was huge. AB 1087 would have required the investor-owned utilities to actually put some funds together for a program to help upgrade and make more resilient different community facilities like community centers and other areas. And SB 467, which gained a lot of traction, right? But this would have imposed health and safety setbacks from oil and gas and prohibited fracking. So those bills did not make it through. Lots of other bills did not make it through. But that said, there were some highlights in the California budget, and there were a few important bills that also made it to the governor's desk. So, for example, there's significant investments in zero emission transportation, so $3.9 billion over the next 3 years, and allocations that have been directed toward climate resilience directly, with the promise of additional funding coming in later years. And so I mentioned like AB 1087, for example, the Community Resilience Hubs bill. That didn't pass, but there was $100 million that have now been set aside to fund those in the budget. So, and then some other priority bills that have made it to the governor's desk is SB 27, which is really focused on basically greenhouse gas emissions reduction and climate resilience projects, getting a whole list of them that aren't currently funded but should be. And it will also direct CARB to add sequestration targets to the state's climate protection efforts, which is pretty big. And some other, smaller bills that are still important. SB 47 increased the amount of funding that the state can spend on plugging abandoned oil and gas wells, which is really important, right? There's health concerns and climate concerns with abandoned oil and gas wells. And SB 596, which was, really charged the Air Resources Board to develop a greenhouse gas emissions strategy for the concrete and cement sector. Also very important. It doesn't go as far as it should, but taking the small wins. So I want to get to kind of the target actions part. California elected leaders really need to step up their ambition in 2022, right? The conversation has changed and needs to keep changing, right? We're seeing climate impacts all across the state, the country, the world. The millions of people suffering from intense heat, from drought, wildfires, toxic smoke, we're all counting on the state. So the first step folks can take to really help us in this fight is to endorse our Climate Safe California campaign as a public pledge of support for California to accelerate aggressive climate policy. And a step beyond that really is engaging your local elected official to start conversations with their state legislators, as well as Newsom, and really send a message to them that they've got to take more action. And I will drop this into the chat as well. And this secondarily, we've got a couple letters. One is focused on telling Governor Gavin Newsom to really step it up on climate policy, covering a lot of the aspects of the campaign that I mentioned in the presentation. And the third is really one address to the legislators that are working for us in Sacramento, right? The ones that have put forward bold policy platforms. We need to help them and their ideas gain momentum and traction as well. So I will drop all of that in the chat. And I just want to say thank you to the Climate Justice Action Now folks and Bianca with Valley Improvement Projects. Robin said it really well. This is a movement, not a moment. And I hope that we can all work together to drive equitable climate policy in Sacramento. So thanks so much for your time.
Well, thank you for your insights. That was an awesome presentation. And I really hope that we can remove all that all that pollution by the 2030 mark and 2050. Okay, now moving on to the local kind of initiatives. Now we're going to be having our project director and one of the leaders of Valley Improvement Projects, Bianca Lopez, talking about how you can get what local actions have been taken and how you can get involved further in local action.
Thank you. I'm really excited, even though we're talking about federal and state action and things that are happening in big picture. All of you had, both of you had, Alex and Davis had some really key examples of what we can do at a local level, which is perfect. And so today I'm going to give you a little bit much of information. I'm going to put a lot of stuff in the chat for you to maybe review later or click on as you explore the rest of the presentation. But I wanted to talk about some really basic things, really big things too, that are happening at a local level. I'm going to try not to talk so fast. I don't want to take up too much time, but local is really where it's at. Yeah, we've heard through the questions on Saturday, what do we do at a local level? How do we hold our representatives accountable? We heard earlier today from Muñeca that direct and local action is what's making stuff happen. It's what's putting pressure on the people who are supposed to be making these decisions for us, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on here in Stanislaus County, and some of them might be specific to a city, but all of these things affect us all here in Stanislaus and even beyond Stanislaus, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the general plan. I'm going to talk about redistricting. I'm going to talk a little bit about water and air. And so I'm going to start off with the general plan. So what is the general plan? The general plan is a once in a lifetime thing. It's a map of what the cities and jurisdictions are going to be doing to address the inequitable distribution of pollution and that is associated with health effects on low-income communities of color. SB 1000 is the law that requires these jurisdictions to take into consideration the environmental justice aspect, right, of the disadvantaged communities. And it actually is SB 535 that identifies what a disadvantaged community is here in California. And so with these two bills, we are going to have a big role to play here. There's a couple of cities here in the county who are starting or will soon start their general plan and their initiative to get community involvement. So the SB 1000, the California Health Collaborative actually shared a really good presentation with us here in Stanislaus through CJAN, a presentation, and they did it. Katie Moose, who's actually here, she can answer some questions at the end if I don't clarify some things for you. But SB 1000 is like I said, environmental justice. It has 7 components of them. Some of them are about identifying and addressing the needs of disadvantaged communities, reducing pollution to improve air quality, equitable access to public facilities, to ensure access to healthy food, promote safe and sanitary homes, promote physical activity. And then the 7th one is really where we need you to participate, is the civic engagement, right? So the communities, the jurisdictions are supposed to get true civic engagement. And we as Stanislaus, as CJAN, we are committing to being at the table. And like Senator Ana Caballero said, if there isn't a seat, bring a chair. So we're bringing a chair if they don't make a seat for us. But the plan is to give us a seat. So be ready with your chair. The Stanislaus Sustainable Communities Coalition is another opportunity for folks to participate in. They actually have a subcommittee where they're going to be talking about and directing most of their time about the general plan. So we're going to be really diving into what does environmental justice look like for all of these components. So if you are interested in getting involved with Stanislaus, the Stanislaus Sustainable Communities Coalition or CJAN, just make sure you stay in contact. Like I said, I'm going to share some stuff in the chat for you to participate towards the end. I'm trying not to do too much here and not sweat more than I'm already doing. Another thing here locally is redistricting, right? And across California, every 10 years we do the the census, right? It's the decennial thing. AB 849 requires that jurisdictions adopt a new district boundary for each of the census areas to make it a more equitable process. And so right now, cities and counties, all these jurisdictions within our state are looking at how to reline our maps so that we can have appropriate representation. And if we don't participate in that, then we can see some of the things that have happened back in the 40s, and even as early as 2004, as the Modesto Bee highlighted in one of their articles, and I'll put the link to the article in the chat as well, so that you can read more about it. But it's a form of systemic government-sanctioned racism if we allow it to, right? So in 2004, 4 Latino neighborhoods in the west side of Modesto, West and South Modesto, helped civil rights attorneys in San Francisco challenge the foot dragging by Modesto and Stanislaus County, and 2 discrimination lawsuits. One demanded better services like those found in affluent neighborhoods. The other better representation because the method for electing the city council at the time all but guaranteed that poor neighborhoods would never have their own city council member. So there's a lot at stake with the general plan and redistricting. I'll share some links in the chat for you to find out more about what these laws and what the requirements are for public engagement as well. So those are things that are affecting, you know, Stanislaus County and in general. We have some serious stuff going on in our water here in our county and actually throughout the country. One of the major issues in our water is nitrates. There are entities that agencies that are supposed to, you know, hold people accountable so that they make sure that we don't pollute our water and our air and everything else, but unfortunately it still happens. The Valley Water Collaborative is addressing groundwater contaminated by nitrates in the Turlock and the Modesto groundwater. And a lot of the stuff that Valley Improvement Project does, which I didn't give an overview, but we do a lot of education pieces, right? We try to educate folks and give information so that people know how to, one, so that they know what's going on, and two, so that they can understand a little bit about why these issues matter. And then three, we want to make sure that we give a little bit of our analysis of what's going on with this issue, right? So that people can participate and voice their opinion. So if you live in if you receive your water here in the county through a private well, and you are you use the Turlock and Modesto groundwater basins, then you have access to free water technically, right? So this organization is a collaborative made of farmers and industry folks who are obligated to find a solution of how to fix this issue of nitrates in our water and the water in these private wells. And so a couple of issues that, you know, we want people to know about is that one, they have to test your water, but they only test it for nitrates. They won't test it for other stuff. So even though they might not find nitrates in your water, there might be other things in your water and it might not be potable. So another thing is that through this program, you have to be the owner of the home or the property. If you rent in that space, then you would have to ask your landlord for permission for your water to be tested. And we always know that landlords don't always collaborate or want to participate in projects like this because they feel like they're going to be held accountable to doing more than what is asked of them. And then lastly, you have to qualify. You have to live in these areas that I stated. So you have to receive your water from a private well, from Turlock and the Modesto groundwater basin. If you don't get your water from these basins, you will soon be able to access clean water. Another issue actually is that they want to solve this problem through water bottles. And we just heard from Alex about what's wrong with plastic and all of the stuff that we are producing and single-use item stuff. But I just want you guys to know there will be a link in the chat so that you can learn more about how to access water if you are affected by nitrates and you live and you qualify for this project. I want you guys to know that there is some clean water for you. You just have to qualify, and I'll give you the link in the chat for folks to be able to apply for that. That is general, right? So not just everybody here in the Turlock Modesto Basin, which is one of the worst basins, is most affected by nitrates. That's why they're leading this project first, and other basins will come along later. Let me catch my breath real quick. Air quality is one of the biggest issues here in Stanislaus County. 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions is actually caused by transportation, not just you and I in our vehicles across the valley, but all forms of transportation. We have, highways that take our food to and from our areas across the state. And everybody's got to come through in here. We're in a basin, like this little bowl that collects air. So air quality is a really big thing for valley improvement projects. And like I said earlier, we do a lot of the education piece, and then we also give people an opportunity to participate and to advocate for people to do better. And so some of the things that we do are, most importantly, is one of the biggest projects here in our county is SCAMP, which is the Stanislaus Community Air Monitoring Project. We're looking for youth and parents who have school-aged kids at home, or if you are in school, we'd like for you to host a PM 2.5 monitor at your school. It's free. And what this does is actually it helps us build community scientists. So we will become the scientists. We have access to the data that these PM 2.5 monitors collect, so that we can later create an emissions reduction project as a whole, so that we can talk about how to reduce the effects of PM 2.5 and black carbon. We actually also did a research project with UC Berkeley, which we will soon be receiving data from about black carbon, so that we can maybe talk about rerouting trucks so that it's not affecting the most disadvantaged communities. So SCAMP is one of the projects that we'd like for you to get involved. I'll have some links in the chat for you. That is one of our biggest air quality projects, and it's here in Stanislaus County. SJB Air is the website that you can see all of these air monitors that we have posted throughout the county. Really only requires electricity. We just need you to plug it in and a Wi-Fi, access to Wi-Fi. Then you will be able to go to sjvair.com, where you can see the air monitors that are closer to you. And now the website has a text alert service for you to be able to receive alerts when the air quality is bad. Or you can also just go to the website and check it out for yourself. Another thing that we say is related to pesticide is pesticide drift, just pesticides in general. Pesticides really affect climate change in a big picture. It affects pollinating insects. It makes our land and our dirt no longer it causes a lot of bad stuff in our dirt, and I can't get into the science of it because I don't have the time or my slide up about the scientificness of all of its effects, but we know it's bad, and we know that it does play a big role in the greenhouse gases, gas emissions, and our food production. So some of the things that we do related to pesticide is we inform parents about the Healthy Schools Act. Parents, if you have a child at school, or if you work at a school, you can submit a request to be notified with 72 hours in advance of any notification of any a pesticide that is going to be sprayed on your campus. So by law, the school has to give you a 72-hour notice. You'll also notice that at school, on the fences near the entrances, they usually have a notification that says, on this date, around this time, this is how much pesticide we're going to spray. It's an FYI. They have to do that by law. But one of the amazing things that we've noticed through our research is that glyphosate is actually used in, I think we have 26 schools in our county here in Stanislaus. Out of those 26, 23 of those schools use glyphosate on campus. And it is the employees that spray it. So we know that in the past, Monsanto has been sued for some serious effects due to spraying glyphosate. And so we have a petition going on. It's called Not in My School, Stop Glyphosate on Campus. So I'll share a link for that. And then soon we'll be hosting a meet and greet with the Stanislaus Ag Commissioner. I'm probably at time, so I'm going to skip that. I'll give you some details. But one of our other big projects is the incinerator. As we mentioned earlier, Alex mentioned that we have to make sure that we properly take care of our waste. We have one of two incinerators here in California. It's in Stanislaus County in Crow's Landing. And later, someone from our organization, Tom, will talk a little bit about the cumulative impacts of all of these things put together. But we want to stop the incineration in Stanislaus County. It's a false solution. As Alex mentioned, we can't just say that we're reducing methane from the landfill because we're burning it, because we're now putting dioxins into our air. There's other NOx, there's other toxic material that we're putting in our air. And even though that they have filters, it's like when people say, oh, it's just a little poison, it's not, it's good for you, right? It's like, no poison is good for us. So to us, it's a false solution. We have a zero waste project, and actually CJAN, Morgan will share a little bit more later about CJAN's and VIP's work towards zero waste, and I will have some more information for you in the chat. So yes, there's a lot of stuff that we can all do at a local level that affects the state and the federal level. So I really think that if you're looking for something to do, CJAN and VIP are the organizations you need to connect with. Please share your contact with us in the chat if you'd like to know more. And like I said, we'll have some things in the chat for you to share a link and learn more about. So I'm going to go ahead and give the mic back to Robin or Morgan so they can facilitate Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Lots of wonderful ways that you can get involved in our community, especially for great causes as well. So now we're going to be moving on to our Q&A session. I noticed that we didn't have a lot of questions, but feel free if you have questions about Bianca's presentation, please put them into the chat. And sorry that we're kind of bouncing around in this idea, in this situation. So Alex, we had a question from Sheila Jacobs, because she was kind of questioning the entire thing, but I also wanted to bring this up. Have you seen the Story of Plastic animation yet? I highly recommend it to everyone. I believe it is only about 5 minutes long.
Yes, it's incredible. And actually the Story of Plastic, the film, it documents the entire story of plastic and how it's made and disposed of, how it relates to environmental racism and environmental justice and climate change. Is currently free on YouTube until the end of September. So it was just nominated for an Emmy, so they're doing this big promo thing. So if you want to watch it, it's a longer version of that short film. It's incredible. And it's free, so why not?
Sounds like a steal. Then we also have another question from James Costello. What is the state of research on recyclable plastic substitutes? Glass will work for some of it, but breakage is a problem. So a durable, recyclable / biodegradable plastic substitute would be great. Also, a national recycling program would help, I would think.
Yes, those are all really great points. I think it's really important to recognize that our current recycling infrastructure is deeply flawed and is not a solution to the single-use plastic crisis as it currently stands. So yes, totally revitalizing our recycling program is key. I don't know too much research into bioplastics. I think it is really important to recognize that bioplastics are out there, but the issue with the ones that we currently have is that they aren't compostable unless you have what's called an industrial composter. They're really expensive. They're not super easily to access. So if you have one of those, you can compost those bioplastics, which are a lot sturdier than glass, but they're just really difficult to get. It's my dream to get one at Eckerd. So that would be great if we did have one, but unless you have an industrial composter, bioplastics are really just as bad as single-use plastics. And I also want to emphasize the phrase unnecessary single-use plastic. So I do want to acknowledge that in a lot of cases, single-use plastic is necessary. I would like to have an IV when I go to the hospital. And there are some things that are made out of plastic that we do need. There are a lot of things that are made out of plastic that we don't need, and we don't need them in the capacity that we're using them. So finding that balance is also really key.
Okay, a new one just popped in, because we know from the Young Adults Fighting Tobacco, they're made from forever chemicals. Do you have any infographics that list all plastics?
I don't offhand, but I would maybe take some time exploring the Break Free from Plastic website that I just linked. Another really interesting tactic that Break Free from Plastic uses is to hold companies accountable are these things called brand audits. And we're actually just did one at Eckerd today. So it's when you go to a beach cleanup or just a cleanup anywhere, pick up all the plastic you see and write down what company it's from and what type of plastic it is. So on their brand audit website link, they have everything detailing what each different type of plastic is. It also goes into where it's made and if it has more than one layers and how that makes it difficult to recycle. So check out the brand audit page for that. And also if you're interested in running a brand audit, they're really great ways to actually hold corporations accountable for single-use plastic production, because at the end of the day, it can't be on the individual. So that's a really cool way to see what companies are actually polluting the most in your neighborhood or in your area.
Yeah, Climate Justice Action Now is actually planning to do like a waste audit of not just plastics, but everything else, doing park cleanups as well in the coming months. So thank you. I don't see any more questions. If anyone wants to speak out and have a question, feel free to go to the reactions button at the bottom and raise your virtual hand. Oh, there we go. I will unmute you for you to ask your question. Uh-oh.
Hi, my name is Darren, and this question is for Alex. In California, we passed a single-use plastic bag ban for grocery stores, which seemed like a really great idea. And then immediately what the grocery stores did is they used thicker bags that they call durable plastic bags. And I'm wondering if you could comment on maybe some of the unforeseen consequences of some of the laws that seem at first to be a good idea, but ultimately, in this case, may not reduce the prevalence of plastic waste.
Yes, that's a really great question and a really important point. I think the biggest. Muted. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yep. Okay, great. Really great question, a really important point. And I think you mentioned really the biggest unforeseen circumstance is that the plastics industry will try to find ways to create things that aren't plastic, but are still plastic. Also, sometimes the better option can pollute more than single-use plastic. So the really great thing about the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act is that this bill was originally proposed last year. And when it didn't get signed, they took the entire rest of the year to review the bill and try to find all of those loopholes that Bianca just put in the chat. So they tried to find all of the ways that companies could take that policy and make it benefit them and make sure that those were tied up in the policy. So if you are a policy nerd, it's really nice to read through it and you can kind of see all the ways that they've written the policy to make sure that things like that don't happen. Because it is something that happens way too often that we don't think about, that I wasn't even thinking about when I first started here. It was something I also had to consider at Eckerd, with my campus and making sure that we weren't just going to use bioplastics when we don't have an industrial composter on campus and it wouldn't actually make that big of a difference. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. Also really quickly, the link that Alyssa put in the chat is the full Story of Plastics documentary. So if you have a little over an hour, I recommend watching it.
Awesome, thank you. I also had a question myself about the industrial composter. Do you know what the requisites for it, kind of the cost of it and how much space is necessary? Is it like a compact idea or is it actually kind of a pseudo facility?
Yeah, it can be pretty compact. Actually, a neighboring college campus, University of South Florida, has one, and it's just in a closet in their dining facility. So they have a smaller one, but they can also get really big and be able to handle huge things. But they are really expensive. They got one through a grant. So I would look at funding options, but they can be pretty compact and you could use them out of school, but also in a big city. Okay, we do have a question that I believe that can kind of go with everyone if everyone wants to kind of comment on this one. Has any of the groups that have spoke or experienced greenwashing by irresponsible corporations like Big Tobacco or Big Oil, if everyone wants to kind of comment on this?
I'll jump in and just say that it's everywhere. I think we've all probably experienced it, whether we knew it or not. It's all over your Twitter feed. You probably get emails. There was a really good article on the way that the fossil fuel industry has kind of pivoted from denial to delay. That was really interesting. And I don't remember the details of it, but I can try and dig that up and share that. But yes, definitely.
If Bianca or Alex want to jump in.
Yeah, I think, fossil fuels is a big issue. There's always, you see commercials about how Coca-Cola is doing this bottle return policy or practice. Their bottles are now recyclable. All of those are false solutions. And actually, in fact, I think with like Coca-Cola, as you will see probably in the story of plastic, that instead of reducing their plastic waste, it increased, and it's just a horrible mess. The way these companies, so one thing that I was going to say during my presentation, these companies have big money. They have these people that go to the state and the federal level to advocate for these policies that allow fossil fuels to keep doing what they're doing. And so what we have is our voice. And I think that's where our money's at, right? Like we need to use our voice like these corporations use. What's the term when you send somebody to a lobbyist? They have money, they pay lobbyists to go and lobby for these policies. We are our own lobbyists, and we need to make sure that we are at the forefront of those conversations all the time, and especially at a local level. So yeah, it happens all the time in the subtle ways sometimes.
Yeah, I think Davis and Bianca hit the nail on the head with that one. It really is everywhere. And like Katie said in the chat as well, we can't fully depend on the corporations to come up with solutions. Did anyone see a couple months ago, I think BP or ExxonMobil like tweeted a carbon footprint calculator and encouraged individuals to calculate their carbon footprint and take action on climate change, when it's these huge companies that are the ones who need to be held to the fullest responsibility. So I think that's really, at least in the plastic movement, where we're seeing a lot of the greenwashing. It's putting all of this pressure on individuals to make the change, when climate change isn't something a single person is going to be able to solve.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And it was going off of the City of Modesto. City of Modesto composts food, green matters, and other compostables put into green bins. Do they use an industrial composter that can compost bioplastics?
Yeah, the City of Modesto is one of the cities within the county that actually has a composting program. If you live in the City of Modesto, you have in a city limits, you have a green waste bin, and you have a black bin, which is for all your other waste. But they do have a big compost facility here. And now with SB 1383, all of the cities in the county and actually across the state jurisdictions have to now recycle or do a lot more about their green waste recycling. So there's going to be food recovery programs. There's going to be everybody has to make sure that they recycle their green waste. So cities who don't have that green waste bin, like Ceres, will now have to implement a green waste bin for folks. So it's now something that Jilton and Bertolotti are thinking bigger picture, because now they're going to have to figure out what to do with this green waste instead of sending it to Covanta to burn. Hashtag buy Covanta. They have only 5 more years on their contract, and we want it to be it.
Okay, thank you for the awesome discussion, guys, and all the awesome questions. So I'm going to be passing the mic over to our other co-host, Morgan Haydock, to introduce our next set of speakers. So
awesome, thank you, Robin.
Over to you.
So next we have a couple of highlights from organizations that work with young people in Stanislaus County. And they're going to talk a little bit about the work they're doing. So I'd like to start off by introducing a member of YAFT. I apologize, the name on the screen is incorrect. Chelsea King is the president of YAFT, and she'll be doing a brief presentation here.
Yeah, hi everybody. And Green. Oh, actually, stop sharing for a second. Sorry about that.
I'm cutting out. Okay. So I am going to turn off my camera. I'm so sorry about that. My internet is kind of bad out here. So let me go ahead and do that. But I am here, I swear. So sorry about that, guys. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes.
ma'am.
Perfect. Okay. So like Morgan said, my name is Chelsea King. I am the president of the Young Adults Fighting Tobacco Coalition. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what YAFT does and the environmental impact of tobacco. Okay, so at YAFT, we work to recommend and implement solutions to address the environmental burden stemming from the tobacco industry. We also work to fight against the health inequities and dangerous impacts the tobacco industry has on the health of members in our community. Currently, right now, we operate in the rural Gold County region in California. That does include Modesto, most of Central California, and as well as Northern California. We are hoping to expand one day, so hopefully we will be all across California and maybe even across the nation. That is the hope. So let me just go ahead and tell you guys a little bit about the impacts of tobacco waste. So first off, globally, an estimated 4.5 trillion of the estimated 6.6 trillion cigarettes consumed each year are deposited as butts somewhere into our environment. That is a lot of waste just going into our environment, and that really negatively affects us. California spends up to $41 million annually on waste cleanup, and cigarette butts make up 37% of this. And that is really, really bad because tobacco waste is toxic waste. It is not only toxic to ourselves, it is also toxic to our environment. So a little bit more about that is that cigarette butts are actually the most prominently littered item in the whole United States. It has won each year since 2019 as the most littered item across the states. And in 2019, almost 1 million cigarette butts were collected in US beaches and waterways across the states. And that's kind of insane. Those are only the ones that have been collected. So we can only imagine how much is still in the environment and goes into the environment every year. And so even though traditional cigarettes are really bad for our environment, e-cigarette waste is almost more dangerous in certain ways because it contains metal, single-use plastic cartridges, batteries, and toxic chemicals. And the worst part of it all is that e-cigarette manufacturers don't provide guidance to consumers on how to properly dispose of this waste. And there's no specific processes in place. So this is almost completely unregulated on how to dispose of e-cigarette waste. And as you can probably imagine, these filters that are used in cigarettes are basically non-biodegradable. They use cellulose acetate and it's a plastic, and it only degrades under severe biological circumstances. So cigarette butts that are tossed on streets and in beaches don't biodegrade at all. Under optimal conditions, it can take 9 months in these severe biological circumstances to degrade. And the worst part is when exposed to the sun, the cigarette butts break down, but only into smaller pieces, which dilute into our water and our soil. And unlike cigarette butts, e-cigarette waste cannot biodegrade even under severe conditions. They can't biodegrade at all. So these cartridges that are discarded on streets just mix in with the litter and eventually break down into microplastics and chemicals that flow into our waterways and seriously negatively affect our wildlife and our environment. So what we're doing here at YAFT is we are combating against these issues. We are fighting against them in the hope that one day the United States will be completely tobacco free. That's the end goal. And right now we are planning some different projects. So one is we're currently planning a cleanup within our local communities. Our first cleanup we're planning on being Modesto. So hopefully we are able to do that. And we are also working with community colleges such as Modesto Junior College to make these campuses tobacco free. This is really the start of all of our projects, is making all campuses in California tobacco-free. The best way to end this tobacco waste is to hopefully not have tobacco in California at all. And the best way to start doing that is to look at our education system and young adults and encourage smokers to quit smoking. So currently in California, all CSUs and UCs are tobacco-free, but community colleges are not. So this is another issue in environmental justice that we are working with, and hopefully all college campuses will be tobacco-free. And that is our hope here at YAFT. One other thing that we are planning is a health professions convention in October. A lot of us that go into these fields are interested in health fields. Obviously, climate change and health go hand in hand. And so we really want to encourage young adults to get into health professions and see the connection with health and climate change. And obviously, we are always actively working with groups to spread this information about the importance of tobacco control and also the environmental impacts of tobacco. Not everyone knows that not only does tobacco negatively affect our health, it also is dangerous to our planet. It's a major factor in environmental damage, especially in the United States. So I'm just leaving here today with just saying you can definitely join our coalition. We're always looking for new members. That is our email address up there, yaft@healthcollaborative.org. You can also listen to our podcast or even join our podcast. So we are always looking to interview new people. I know we have a lot of amazing coalitions and groups on here, and we've gained a pretty good following on our podcast. It's called CJAN Green, and we like to work as a platform to kind of highlight social, environmental, and waste issues in California and across the United States. So if you are interested in being on our podcast and spreading information or whatever you want to say to the world, definitely email us because we would love to have you on. So thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry I couldn't have my camera on. I wish I could have, but I really appreciate you guys listening today.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, for coming. That was an amazing presentation, and it was awesome to hear about what you guys have been doing in the community. Next up, we have, well, actually, before I go into next up, if you have questions for any of these three presenters, please put them in the chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end of these presentations. But next up, we have Emily Bass-Knight here to talk about Citizens Climate Lobby.
Hello. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
So good afternoon. I'm Emily Deanda, or Bass-Knight. I was recently married, so my name has recently changed. I'm here to present on Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been a member of Citizens Climate Lobby since the fall of 2017. I was originally introduced to the organization by an NJC teacher that I had at the time. We're just going to get right into it. A little bit about Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, grassroots advocacy climate change organization focused on national policies to address climate change. Specifically, we're focused on advocating for a national fee and dividend, or price on carbon, to reduce emissions as quickly and efficiently as possible. A carbon fee and dividend strategy is essentially a fee placed on fossil fuel suppliers to incentivize businesses and people to switch to clean energy. The fee would then give back to households as a dividend for them to spend as they wish. As a part of their goal, CCL is committed to empowering individuals by equipping them with the tools for effective climate advocacy. Part of this is providing spaces for individuals and groups to exercise personal and political power. Today, I'm going to go over a few key things CCL specifically provides to youths involved in the organization. And I'm going to take a bit of a personal approach as a young adult involved in the local Modesto chapter here in Stanislaus County. So one of the ways, and probably one of the most incredible things that CCL offers to youth, are grants to attend the national conference in DC. So for CCL chapters in California, the grants are awarded to youth from red, which are reliably Republican districts or purple districts, where the district changes hands between Republican and Democrat in the inland areas of the state. So in 2019, Modesto sent 2 students, myself and another student from Stanislaus State University, to attend the national conference. The grants we received helped pay for our lodging and our travel expenses. We also received funds directly from our chapter that helped us out on the trip significantly. And it was able to take us all the way to DC, which we had never been before. And as first generation college students, the experience was phenomenal. Going to DC for the first time from a rural area, it was interesting just seeing the political power there and the dynamics between those who had already been to DC before in the conference and those who are new. We met some pretty incredible people. We were able to connect with other CCLers or CCL participants from across the nation. In the picture all the way to the left, that's Ohio and Kansas and Indiana represented there, and then California as well. It was interesting to hear other people's experience just working with their climate issues within their own states and just getting a better perspective of more of that national feel of what's going on and how people are approaching it from other areas. And there was even in that picture a gentleman who ran for city council and won his race, and just being able to talk to us about that really opened our eyes to the possibilities that are out there. Throughout the conference, it's across 2 or 3 days. The first 2 days, they offer climate advocacy training specifically for youth, which is a really great way just to introduce us into how to talk to our political representatives. So that involved role playing a member of Congress, and then you would have your group that would all be assigned roles to ask questions. You had to kind of think on your feet, and you had to adjust your strategies for talking to them, trying to identify their goals and their values that they hold. And that was part of the climate advocate training, is how to identify those and work with a member of Congress and leading them to understand what we're talking about regarding a carbon price and whether they can support that and trying to link the carbon price to their values so that they feel that they can. The conference also offered information sessions. So they had the economics of a carbon price strategy. They had information sessions on how to speak to conservatives about climate change and a carbon fee and dividend strategy. And that's one thing that's really great about Citizens Climate Lobby, is that they are bipartisan, and we do have members that are Republican or conservative within our organization. So there's just a very respectful feel to how we interact with each other. And then when we take that in front of our members of Congress, it looks really good, and they're a little more on board to listen to what we have to say. So the last day of the conference, you would meet with your member of Congress or MOC for about 10 to 30 minutes. We were really happy back in 2019 to be able to speak face-to-face with Josh Harper. We had about 15 minutes with him, and it just was a really successful session. You could really see the youngest member in our group, who was still in high school at the time, her just using that training that she had absorbed over the past 2 days and really bringing it out. And it was just incredible to see all of us working together. So that's what we do more of on a national level or federal level, but what does CCL do for youth locally? So one of the things CCL provides is the opportunity to present to local civic groups. So as part of CCL Modesto, I was able to conduct research and present on the differences between carbon cap and trade and carbon fee and dividend, which is the CCL preferred strategy, at the Modesto Junior College Science Colloquium twice, and then once as a part of the Modesto Institute for Continuing Learning. And that's the picture that you see there on the far left for their series on climate change. So as part of presenting to local groups, you get more exposure to the community and to people from a variety of backgrounds. You learn professional skills, how to answer questions and handle difficult situations. And as a young adult coming into those spaces, it was just really interesting to learn how to really keep your cool when you have people that are antagonistic or they don't like what you're saying. And it was just a great time to experience that type of adversity and just work through it and create a space that's still respectful and where everybody can talk. So it's just some of the skills that you're able to have as you go through the organization and as they line up those civic meetings for you. And then another thing that the CCL local chapter offered was a trip to the NorCal Regional Conference. So the last in-person conference was January 2020. Over 105 attendees were under the age of 25, and we had 64 of those that were in high school. So it was really focused on youth for that conference specifically. We did provide breakout sessions specifically for youth and high schoolers, how to create advocacy groups, either school-based or community-based. And those were some interesting sessions. Myself and a high school student from the Bay Area were able to co-MC the event. So it really brought us up to speed on what it takes to organize a conference and how to set up a tabling session, which is great because you can always take that wherever, and especially when things happen in Modesto, like Earth Day in the Park, those types of skills come in. And so one aspect, and again, of the Citizens Climate Lobby culture is that they have these teams or these subgroups. So at this particular conference, you really saw a youth action team shining, and they do try to connect youth with each other across the state, and then provide those resources so that they can know how to start a group and get the support they need to bring it full circle. And then just again, personally, Citizens Climate Lobby doesn't just impact how we advocate for policies or what we're saying to our local civic groups, but also personally. And I feel like it's affected a lot of the members in the group, but these are just some images that I thought of as I was putting together the presentation. The one in the center with all the people surrounding in a circle, surrounding that one gentleman, was a faith-based tabling session talking about how to get evangelicals on board with not only agreeing with climate change, but then agreeing that a carbon pricing strategy is where we need to go. And it was just incredible to see how many people show up for that. And as a Christian myself, it was really great to see all these people wanting to learn how to talk to other evangelicals about climate change, which is just great. So in our Stanislaus community, we've got a lot of faith-based people groups, and just having that many people there to spread awareness of climate change and what to do is fabulous. The picture on the lower part of the screen is myself and a student that was sent on the grant to DC. It just boosted our confidence, and we could have never imagined having that opportunity if it wasn't for Citizens Climate Lobby. And it just really is empowering to step on that soil and just realize that you have just as much political power as anybody else. And then the two pictures on the side are just my pictures of my family. Originally, we came from a very conservative background, but they didn't believe in climate change, and that is no longer the case. And so Citizens Climate Lobby really provided a good space for us to really open our eyes and realize, the lies that are talked about on the other side, and just the difficulties in overcoming trying to talk to each other. And so it was just incredible to have Citizens Climate Lobby reach a personal level in my own family and just go from there. So right now, the Modesto chapter works on presenting carbon fee and dividend to local groups. We do write letters to the editor, and then of course lobbying our member of Congress, which right now is Josh Harper. And we have a good relationship with him, and we're really grateful that he's our current MOC. And then we also, as a national organization, are working on calling our representatives and asking for a carbon pricing strategy to be within the budget reconciliation that's going through the House right now. So we want that carbon price in the draft because we believe that it can reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030 and reach that net zero emissions goal by 2050. So we're really pushing that right now. We do have our November conference coming up, and registration will open September 27th if you're interested. And I do have just a link to the Citizens Climate Lobby homepage there below. As a local chapter, we meet on the first Saturday of each month We are on Zoom, so if you'd like the link, you can contact our group leader, Bill and Ellie, at the email address provided below. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'm just really thankful for CJAN to have me here. And it's great to just share all this information together as citizens of Stanislaus County. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for presenting today, Emily. And we will have time for questions, as I said before, right after our next presentation. So please, if you have questions, put those in the chat and we will get a chance to get those answered. Right. Okay. Sorry. New screen share here. Next up, we have Alyssa Lee coming from the Youth Climate Finance Alliance. So I'll turn it over to her.
Hi, thank you so much. Let me get my screen shared. Hi, everyone. My name's Elisa. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. And I'm going to just make sure that I can see the chat while this is happening. But yes, I'm with the Youth Climate Finance Alliance. I'm actually in the Boston area, but I am from Modesto originally and hoping to move back there in a year. And I want to share a little bit more about who we are, but basically, we are targeting the financial institutions that fund the fossil fuel industry because we consider that in order to really stop climate change, we need to take big action. And that means going after what keeps the fossil fuel industry running, which alongside political power is money. So we're really serious about actually ending the fossil fuel industry, ending its power and its reign over our energy system. Obviously, we need a transition of how that's going to happen, but we think immediately we need to get them to stop extracting, stop drilling, stop polluting, because we cannot have any more climate disasters, given how much they've already hurt so many of our communities. A little bit about me. I went to UCLA and that's where I got my organizing start. I organized the campaign that eventually won a few years after I graduated to get the University of California system to stop investing in the fossil fuel industry as one of their investors. And then during my time after I graduated, I was short-lived, but really, really beloved time of getting to volunteer with Valley Improvement Projects, meeting Bianca and Tom. In the middle is me at the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition Lobby Day at Sacramento. And then over on the right, you can see some things I've been involved in since moving to Boston. Including speaking at a march against a frack gas pipeline along the route of along Massachusetts, and also speaking at a rally at the State House, calling on the Massachusetts State Pension Fund to also stop investing in fossil fuels. So I want to start. Finance can be a little bit complicated. I don't know how many people we have who are young people on this call, but I wanted to start with a game. So in the game, we will show you an image and I want you to guess in the chat what you think that image represents. And I want you to guess both wrong, like funny answers, as well as actual legitimate guesses. And then I will reveal the answer. And because we don't have a lot of time, we'll go kind of quickly. So get your hands on the keyboard ready, okay? So first, this graph, what do you think this graph represents? You can guess some wrong answers and some right answers in the chat. Yes, this is how you would map a rainbow on your graphing calculator. What else? Thank you, Ephraim, for modeling the game. Rate of carbon emissions in our ideal future. That's pretty close. Yeah, definitely. Mood. All right, well, reveal the answer here. You can keep guessing, but Davis is very, very close. This is basically the pathway to limit warming of the overall world to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if you've heard of the Paris Agreement, that was what was globally agreed upon in 2016 as that refers to the agreement that we can allow up to 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming as a global community in order to avoid catastrophic runaway climate change. So this graph shows what that drop off of fossil fuel emissions, carbon emissions, needs to look like. All right, next one, 80%. All right, we got to go rapid fire here. What are your guesses about what 80% represents? It's very vague. All right, I know I'm really short on time, so I'm gonna speed through it. 80% represents the percentage of world's biodiversity that's held on indigenous lands. So that means what all of the world's biodiversity we have, 80% of it is controlled by indigenous people who are in control of their own land. This is really key. You can, I'll drop all the links to sources in a second, but this is why we really center the demands and the communities and the stories of indigenous people throughout our campaign, because we also believe that in order to stop climate change, we need to be giving land back to the control of indigenous people who can steward it and have often protected it from environmental devastation. And that also refers to not just fossil fuel extraction, but also deforestation, the mass cutting down of trees. And these are some of the companies that are the top drivers of deforestation in the Amazon. All right. Any wrong guesses or right guesses as to what this graph represents? Maybe folks are a little tired. Okay. We'll speed through it here. My wallet through the week. That's hilarious. It's getting thinner and I'm so sorry. It shows the banks with the largest loan exposures to fossil fuel companies, basically the banks who are the largest lenders. So who do you think is at the very top here? Which bank? All right, Tina got it. Oh my gosh, you know it. It's JP Morgan Chase. It's a very popular bank in Modesto. Yes. And who do you think this person is? Oh, hey, Francis got it. Yep, president of JP Morgan Chase Bank. This is Jamie Dimon. He is the CEO. And I'm glad that by the end of this presentation, you'll all know what he looks like. The people who are the main executives of these companies, they have faces, they have names, they have addresses. We can write to them, we can talk to them, we can call them out. That is a big part of our campaign. All right, number 5, 0. What do you think 0 represents here? For folks on the live stream, I'm gonna read out some of these comments about Jamie Dimon. Someone wrote, looks suspicious. 0 referring to no fossil fuels, 0 waste. Great guesses, all really important. And some of you got really close. This is the amount of money that can be invested in new fossil fuel supply projects if we want net zero by 2050. So net zero is a very close, can mean a lot of things, but if we generally mean that we're trying to get to that 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, that first drop off graph we saw, this is actually coming from a very, very credible agency called the International Energy Agency. They are a top authority in the energy system. So it's not just climate activists who listen to this agency, it's the energy companies themselves. And they said in a report that came out September this year, or excuse me, that came out in May this year, that in order to meet net zero by 2050, we have to end all fossil fuel expansion now, which means also ending money for new expansion. So this is huge. All right, I think this is almost the last one. What do you think these represent? And I'm a little late dropping the sources. Logos of death. Yep, these are the top 6 US banks in the country, and they're also all banks that have committed to net zero or Paris alignment, but yet they are still financing fossil fuels. So based on the previous thing we just saw, they're actually like completely misaligned with their own commitments. If they want to be net zero or Paris aligned, they have to stop financing fossil fuels right now. And yet in 2020 alone, this is how much they've financed. Bank of America JP Morgan Chase topping the list at 51.3 billion. And since the Paris Agreement was signed, the US banks in the country have funded trillions of dollars into fossil fuels. Here we go. I'll drop a source in the chat. $3.8 trillion between 2016 and 2020. And last, this is a uplifting one, 7.5 billion. I don't know the answer to Shayla's question about Wells Fargo, but I can find that out. This is the amount of money that Energy Transfer Partners, which is the owner of the Dakota Access Pipeline. If you remember in 2016, there was a ton of resistance around DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline, by the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. This is the money that they lost because of social pressure and protests, because of folks like you and me. And that comes from this study from University of Colorado at Boulder, which is pretty incredible. And my first bank account when I became a college student was with JP Morgan Chase. In 2017, I closed it down because of the no DAPL protests. And that's part of what is included in the 7.5 billion, but it's also just generally money they lost from people pulling out. Okay, so that's the end of the game. I have almost 0 time left, but I just want to basically show you that the problem is that fossil fuel and deforestation companies, they're destroying our home and hurting our people. They're stealing our resources while hoarding money and calling it greenwashing. And they're funneling trillions of dollars. The finance industry is funneling trillions of dollars to these very companies. So we want to really change the culture and have people think of banks as much of polluters as Shell and Exxon. So just to end with who we are. I'm so sorry, I gotta skip all this. I will drop this link in the chat so you can read more about this later. But basically, we are planning to train thousands of young people to take action against our number one target, which is Chase Bank as the world's largest funder, if you remember from that presentation from our game. And this October 29th, we're going to have a National Youth Day of Action at Chase Bank branches across the country to demand that they end financing fossil fuel expansion. We want them to end financing all fossil fuels, but we're starting with ending financing fossil fuel expansion. And throughout the spring, up until May 2022, we're going to be organizing locally to get shareholders to try to vote yes in favor of what's called a shareholder resolution. It's basically this proposal that people who own shares of a company all have the option to vote on. And so we're going to try to get all of these different shareholders to vote in favor of a resolution for Chase to stop financing fossil fuel expansion. And we really invite you all to join us. This is particularly for youth. We define youth as age 25 and under, but adults can definitely be supportive and involved as mentors and just supporters like myself. I am 28. I'm technically, not a youth in our campaign. But really, we're calling this action Fossil-Free Future. We really are fighting for a future where corporations can no longer use their money to destroy our earth and our collective home. We want specific, real, no BS commitments to end fossil fuel expansion. And I just want to show some of the really wonderful things our young people in our network have created. These are some amazing art things, banners, flyers. They've been sticking these stickers on Chase Bank ATMs all over. I think you should do it too. I think it'd be so cool to imagine going up to a Chase Bank ATM and see that it says world's #1 banker of climate chaos, and have just people learn more about this. These are some of the groups that are part of this, and I'd love to see groups from my hometown get involved. And we really prioritize supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth-led groups. Here are some other really cool things that our youth groups have done. Houston Youth Climate Strike, they're one of our strongest groups. They're awesome. They're like all high school students. They're amazing. One of their members is actually joining our meetings with Chase and bank executives this year. And she has just actually brought some of them to tears. She is awesome. Her name's Vidya, and I love her. These stickers are so cool. They've all been designed and made by young people. And I just think that's one of the great things about having young people involved in activism is their art, their humor, their creativity. So don't think that you don't have something to add. Again, October 29th, bank actions at bank branches all across the country. We're specifically targeting Chase, but definitely if you want to target a Wells Fargo or a TD Bank or a Citibank, that is also welcome, as long as you are down with what we're doing and down with our demands. And we don't have time for this video, but I will drop the link because it is just so hype. It is so good. It's only 3 minutes, and it's a really great thing to share if you want to have people get the short version of what I just shared today. And we have a lot of resources on our network, including coaches and action support, trainings. And we'd really love to have folks in the Central Valley involved. And we have coaches all across the country. So with that being said, I am so grateful to be on this panel with everybody, and I'll drop my stuff in the chat. Thank you for playing the game.
Well, thank you so much for presenting. That was amazing and very, very educational. I want to let everybody know, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And if you were a presenter, if you could answer them in the chat as well, that would be fabulous. We are running a little bit low on time, and I want to be respectful of everybody. And we do have one presentation left. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. Presenters, please feel free to get in the chat and answer those and get in contact with people. With that being said, we have one more presentation for the evening, and this is Tom Helm from the Valley Improvement Projects, here to talk about environmental racism.
Hey everybody, thank you, Morgan, and thanks, Alyssa. I didn't even know I was going to be actually going after Alyssa when Bianca told me to give this presentation. It's good to see you, but I hate to follow you because I know what a energetic organizer and presenter you are. So thanks for joining us and being part of all the presentations, Alyssa. So I'm going to give a quick rundown of what environmental justice and environmental racism is all about, and try to tie it into climate justice and climate change. And I know that we're running late, so I will make it as quick and simple as possible. Let me share my screen real quick. Let's see, there you go. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, is it in present mode?
Yes.
On my screen, it looks different. Okay. All right, we'll go for it. So environmental justice, before it kind of had that name, it was called environmental racism, and you'll see why by some of the information that I'm going to give. It actually goes back to the practice of redlining, which is obviously very much steeped with racism in the United States. It was the act of kind of making certain communities not getting the resources, bank loans, other things for developing housing. And so it was a way for the powers that be to keep people of color, especially in certain neighborhoods, and not have that kind of upward mobility and be able to access financing and stuff like that. And so then once you have all the poor people or the people of color in a community, it's really easy to put all the polluting sources in that same community. So that's kind of what developed over the years in the United States. And like, a lot of people hear environmental justice, they think of the environmental movement, but environmental justice, coming from the idea of environmental racism, is actually more kind of came after the civil rights movement, or developed alongside the civil rights movement. Even when you hear about Martin Luther King in the days, months before he was assassinated, he was doing organizing with garbage workers and stuff like that, and because of their bad conditions, working conditions, that had impacts on their health. So that's an environmental health issue. That's an environmental justice and an environmental racism issue. Because you're low income or you're a person of color, things are dumped on you that are going to be bad for your health. So having bad working conditions where you're more likely to be injured, or you're more likely to get sick after years of working there. And so a lot of that, even before they called it environmental justice, that was the idea behind it. And it's a civil rights issue, because if you're doing something to somebody because of their race or ethnicity, that's a civil rights issue and environmental racism. So a few examples to bring it home to California. There was a study that California Waste Management Board did. They wanted to find out what the best way to cite polluting sources, especially things like trash incinerators, which I don't know if you've talked about a little bit this weekend, about how Stanislaus County has one of only 2 trash incinerators in the entire state of California, over by Crow's Landing. So in 1984, they did this study, and they hired a consultant, and what they basically said in that study was, if you want to be able to cite something that nobody wants in their backyard, look for rural, low income, less educated, and they even specifically mentioned Catholic communities, which to me, they're basically saying, you know, immigrant Latino communities, and without coming out and saying just that. And so this was the site, like I said, incinerators, landfills, power plants, other toxic facilities. It was actually just a year later, a year after this report came out, when they started planning to put the incinerator in West Stanislaus County near Crow's Landing, just off of the 5, near the landfill there. 1 year after this report came out is when they started planning to build that. And then by the late 80s, it was built and has been there ever since. And it spews all kinds of air pollution, particulate matter, dioxin, which is like a toxic metal that can stay in the soil and in the environment for a very long time. Also in the 80s, a study was done that showed that although socioeconomic status was a big factor in whether or not you're more likely to live next to a hazardous site, race was still the most significant factor among those variables. So what that means is, even if you are a person of color, if you're in that community that was historically redlined and now there's a bunch of polluting things next to you, even if you stay in your community and you're able to buy your own home or you have a business, you're still in that community that has all that pollution. So that even the socioeconomic upward mobility, race is still the #1 factor as to determine whether or not you're living next to a hazardous facility. So it shows you how race and racism is ingrained in environmental justice, and that's why oftentimes environmental racism is still used, even though obviously there's lots of poor white people that live next to polluting facilities as well. And the area, the town of Crow's Landing and the area, unincorporated county area around the trash incinerator is somewhere around 75 to 80% people of color, mostly Latino. You know, these are historically farm worker communities out there in the rural parts of the county. So something to think about. Even 20 years later in 2007, they basically redid the study and they showed that that not much has changed. In fact, that people of color are found to be more concentrated around hazardous waste facilities than previously shown in the 1987 study. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to die from air pollution related causes than white Americans. Latino children are twice as likely to be hospitalized for asthma, 40 times more likely to die from asthma than white children. So this is still going on in America today, even though it's not, you know, a video of George Floyd, you know, dying at the hands of police. It's something that happens over decades, right? But it's literally taking years off of people's lives or making someone's life less healthy. So they're, you know, taking more trips to the hospital and having to deal with more. You're more likely to have that medical debt, go bankrupt. It's kind of a domino effect when it comes to these environmental injustices. So right here in Stanislaus County, the state created this thing called CalEnviroScreen, which is California Environmental Screening Tool. And it basically, it puts together both the pollution burdens and the socioeconomic burdens. And going along with what I said, you know, even if you're a more wealthy white community and you might have something polluting in your community or in your neighborhood, well, there's going to be more people that, you know, maybe they're retired, or maybe one of the adults in the household doesn't have to work because one is bringing in enough money. You're going to have more time to show up at board meetings or make, you know, trips to Sacramento or talk to your representatives to let your complaints be known. And going back to that report, the Sorrell report, you know, why they're saying if you want to cite something and have people not raise a fuss about it, you know, have it in these low income rural, you know, communities of color. So that's why they throw in the socioeconomic burdens on top of the pollution burdens. The idea being the poorer you are, the more disadvantaged you are, the less time you're going to have to research, complain, to even know. If you're in a majority Spanish speaking community, are notices going out that are only in some contaminated or contaminating polluting facility next to you, you might not even know. So when you look at Cal EnviroScreen in Stanislaus County and you put together those two factors, there's 94 census tracts that make up Stanislaus County, and 29 of them, so about 30 out of 90, it's a little less than a third of the county is in the 90th to 100th percentile, which means that only about 10% of the state is worse than these census tracts in Stanislaus County. 61% or 61, sorry, out of the 94, so about 2/3 of the entire county is considered a disadvantaged community, which has to do with basically the medium household income level, which I don't know right off the top of my head, but you take the poverty line and it's less than that. So that's 2/3 of Stanislaus County. 7 of them are in the 99th percentile, which means only 1% of the rest of the state is worse off than some of these communities. And you can see them right there: Airport neighborhood, Bystrom neighborhood, which is kind of south, Modesto, south of Airport, Shackelford, and 2 in West Modesto, kind of west of the 99. There's 1 more in North Modesto, right off of the highway, West Orangeburg and Carver Streets. And then also in South Modesto, the Crow's Landing, Hatch area. All of those areas are in the top 99 percentile of Cal EnviroScreen. So, if you're from here and you know the area, you know that that's largely people of color and low income people live in those areas. So you have things like the highway running through there, and a lot of trucking going in and out of different facilities that add to all that. Plus you add on top of that, maybe housing is less affordable, the jobs that people have pay less, stuff like that. This is oh, I was just reading the chat, making sure it wasn't a question for me. Let's see, let me go to the next slide. Oh, and the highest scores, you have to look at all of the different classifications on Cal EnviroScreen, but the different things that were rated especially high for are particulate matter, which is an air contaminant, contaminated drinking water, pesticide exposure, asthma, poverty, unemployment, housing burden, and I think language isolation is one of them too, which means there's a lot of people that English isn't their first language. I think is pretty high in some of these areas too. So like I said, 99 percentile on Cal EnviroScreen. The Crow's Landing area is a good example where you have a trash incinerator, a landfill, the Freeway 5 running through it. You have a lot of agricultural area around it, so there's pesticides being sprayed. There's a lot of trucking, hauling stuff, whether it's ag or other industry, or the trucks that go into the incinerator and the landfill to drop stuff off. That's a lot of diesel pollution, a lot of diesel particulate matter. There's a growing number of warehouses being built out in the Patterson area right off the 5. So that means more trucks are going to be coming off the 5 and going into those warehouses. And then there's an Amazon warehouse there. They're going to be cars driving in and out to deliver stuff. There's another warehouse being built right outside of Turlock as we speak. It was just permitted recently. So these are some important local issues to know about. And I think that is the last slide. So is there any questions? No? I guess Bianca is going to be taking the questions. So thanks a lot. I tried to make it as quick as possible because I know you're running late, but I really appreciate you all being here and being part of this great event.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I know we are at 5:30, so I understand if some of you have to hop off. There are just 2 other things that I wanted to go over with all of you, including a way for young people to get involved in climate action. So if you're able to stay, please do. give me just a moment here to present there we go. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to let you guys know about is for our climate pledge that we have been talking about throughout the weekend, we are holding a raffle. So if you do your pledge, you will be entered into a drawing to win one of these 5 prizes that are listed down here on the screen. To enter your pledge, you can go ahead and I will put a link in the chat when I am done, and you can enter it there, or you can tag us on social media with your pledge as a video or in written form. Okay. So this is the big thing I wanted to talk about with all of you, and that is joining our Stanislaus Environmental Youth Activist Academy. This is going to be 10 weekly workshops targeted for Stanislaus youth who want to become activists for environmental, social, and climate justice. So we're highly encouraging, if you are a young person and you want to get involved in the climate justice movement, I'm going to put the link, an interest form link in the chat. If you know young people who want to get involved, please send them this link and have them let us know that they're interested. We're really excited to gather all the youth in Stanislaus County and teach them a little bit about how they can take action in their own communities. Right, and just a reminder, we do have our CJAN meeting on the first Tuesday of the month. It is on Zoom. The next 5 dates are listed there. And I also wanted to let you know about our Plastic Policy Committee. This committee is currently working on helping schools move to get rid of single-use plastics. And so we would love to have you join us. Our next meeting is on Sunday, September 25th at 3 o'clock. If you can't make that one, please feel free just to email me and let me know you're interested, and I'll make sure you get all of the emails about the event. So that being said, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. I'll put those links in the chat as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at cjanmorganhaydock@gmail.com or check out our website, cjanstanislaus.wixsite.com/website. So I'm going to go ahead and put a whole bunch of links in the chat now for you guys. One moment. There you go. Okay, that should be everything that we just talked about. Thank you all so much for being here today and participating in our first virtual climate rally. We hope that you guys will get involved with CJAN and the other local organizations you heard about today, and make sure to make a pledge about what you can do to stop climate change. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing. Thank you, everybody, for sticking a few minutes longer. I tried to make sure Tom was a little bit shorter, but he said everything was necessary. Everything that said was necessary. And he did say he forgot to tie in the climate justice part. So I apologize if he didn't do that. I think that he was really going to talk about the correlation between, COVID, and we can see the effects of the disadvantage or the disproportionate effects on different communities. COVID has really shared or shown us that, those who are already struggling will struggle even more when climate change comes, because we are going to be overburdened. As the last slide that he shared that the community showed the cumulative impacts in just that one community. So thank you for letting us. Any closing comments, Robin, Liz, Morgan? I know we're officially done, but tell us how you feel.
I feel great, but what I do want to say is I want to say thank you for all the CJAN members who are here. We put in a lot of effort to do all this stuff. So everybody like John Lucas, Sheila Jacobs, Linda, Tim, all the different people who are still here. Thank you guys so much for all the effort you put into this, and I feel really great about it. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys. We couldn't have done this without you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you all for joining, because I feel like this was all just a really big learning experience with all everybody talking and everybody giving their presentations and stuff. It's all just a wonderful learning experience, and thank you for doing that with us.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop the live stream. And if anybody, oh shoot, I didn't share with you guys the Spotify. If you weren't at the last presentation, we shared a playlist, the Climate Rally 2021 playlist, and I am going to share it here. If
And
you
we
guys
can
want
send it
to
out
give a
in
listen.
the follow-up email.
Yes, we will do that.
And Jose, I forgot to thank Jose. Thank you very much. Don't want to miss
Everyone.
anybody.
Bianca, can I go ahead and stop the recording?
Yeah.